Hey there. Ever get that feeling like when you're on vacation and it starts out amazing, but then after a few days it's kind of, well, blah, even though you're still in paradise?
Yeah.
Turns out, our brains are actually wired to get used to things, even the good stuff.
Right.
And today's deep dive is all about that phenomenon, what researchers call habituation. We're taking a look at this one book that's got me thinking differently about everything, from my relationships to how easily we believe, like fake news online, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, what's so interesting about habituation is it's not just about getting used to things. It's really our brain's way of hitting the snooze button on information it considers like old news.
Yeah.
So it can focus on the new and potentially more important stuff.
Oh, so it's all about efficiency for our brains.
Exactly. Yeah, it's about resource management for your brain.
Okay.
Even single-celled organisms do it.
Hmm.
You know, they learn to ignore a repeated stimulus.
Whoa.
And think about a shocking image. Your reaction fades the more you see it.
Right.
That's habituation in action.
Okay, that makes sense, but what does this mean for us, in our everyday lives?
Well, for one, it impacts how we experience happiness.
Okay.
There's a study in the book about people who ate macaroni and cheese every single day.
Okay, now that's a study I could get behind.
Right. But here's the thing. They actually enjoyed it less over time.
What?
Yeah, they became so used to it that the joy faded.
You mean like how that new car smell wears off?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this applies to more than just material things.
Right.
This highlights how crucial novelty is,
Okay.
even in good things,
Yeah.
right? Think about your relationships. Introducing surprise date nights or trying a new activity together can reignite that initial spark. Or at work, think about incorporating a new skill or taking on a new project that stretches you. These things can help prevent monotony and boost your engagement.
So it's like we need to actively inject novelty into different areas of our lives to combat the effects of habituation. But isn't habituation also about resilience?
It is. It is. The book highlights research on how students react to bad grades. And they found that those struggling with depression took longer to bounce back emotionally. And it suggests that their brains weren't habituating to the negative emotions as quickly.
So it's not just about being mentally tough, it's about how our brains are literally wired to process and adapt to those emotions over time.
Exactly. And this difference in habituation can have a huge impact on our ability to cope with, all kinds of challenges.
Yeah.
And, there's another area where this plays out. Creativity.
Oh, okay, tell me more.
Well, the book talks about Dick Fosbury, the Olympic high jumper,
Yeah.
who completely revolutionized the sport with the Fosbury flop.
Right.
Imagine seeing that for the first time, jumping backwards over the bar.
That's incredible. I never realized how groundbreaking that was, at the time.
Yeah,
It makes you wonder what else we might be missing, just because we're so used to doing things a certain way.
it does. And researchers believe that slow habituators, those who are less quick to adapt, they might be the ones who see those opportunities for innovation because they're not as bound by what's considered, normal or the way it's always been done.
Okay, that's fascinating. But the book also talks about a downside to all this tuning out, right? Like
Right.
how it makes us vulnerable.
Yes, that's what's so fascinating about this whole concept. It has these positive aspects, but then there's a flip side.
Right.
For example, it can make us more susceptible to lies.
Wait, what? How so?
Well, studies have shown that as people's brains habituate to dishonesty, they actually lie more and more.
Oh, no.
It's almost as if the guilt or discomfort associated with lying decreases with each lie they tell.
Like a slippery slope.
Exactly. And this ties into something called the illusory truth effect, which basically means that the more we hear something repeated, even if it's false, the more likely we are to believe it.
Oh, wow, that's scary. It's like that saying, repeat a lie often enough and it becomes the truth.
Unfortunately, yeah, that seems to be how it works, at least to some extent.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important now, more than ever, to be really careful about what we're consuming and sharing online.
Right.
And to be wary of those repeated claims, even if they sound familiar
Yeah.
or seem to confirm our existing beliefs. We have to be extra vigilant.
It really makes you think twice about those viral posts we see every day, doesn't it?
It really does. And it's not just about online misinformation. Habituation can also make us blind to risk in our everyday lives.
Okay, I can see that. When you first start driving, you're super cautious, but as you get more
And
experience...
You get more comfortable,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes that comfort can lead to complacency. It's like your brain has habituated to the risks of driving, so you don't perceive them as acutely anymore.
So how do we avoid falling into that trap?
That's a great question. And the book has some interesting examples. One that really struck me was about a time in Sweden when they switched from driving on the left side of the road to the right.
They did that all at once. That's wild.
It is. And you know what? Accidents actually decreased
No.
because it forced everyone out of their deeply ingrained habits,
Wow.
making them much more alert and aware.
Wow, that's a powerful example of how shaking things up can really make us more aware of risk.
Right.
But I'm curious, are there smaller everyday things we can do to avoid becoming too complacent?
Absolutely.
Mm.
The book suggests something as simple as changing up the usual warning signs
Okay.
at a construction site, or even consciously switching up your daily routines.
Oh, okay.
These small disruptions can actually make a big difference in breaking those patterns of habituation.
Little things to keep our brains from going on autopilot.
Exactly.
So we've talked about how habituation can impact our happiness, our resilience, even our creativity.
Yeah,
But the book also touches on how it shows up in some pretty serious ways too, right?
that's right.
Yeah.
It can make us blind to risks, as we discussed. But it also plays a role in how we perceive social issues and injustices, sometimes with dangerous consequences.
Okay, that sounds like a heavy but important topic. Can you elaborate?
Sure. Well, think about it this way. We can become desensitized to things we see or experience frequently, even if they're harmful or unethical.
Right.
The book talked about this study with a Red Cross poster
Okay.
depicting kids at a pool. But there was this subtle racial bias in the image.
Really?
And most people who saw it didn't even notice the bias because it reflected certain societal norms that they had become habituated to.
It's almost like we're wired to accept the familiar, even if it's not right.
Exactly. And this blindness to what's wrong can extend to much bigger issues. The book mentions John Howard Griffin,
Okay.
a journalist who back in the 1950s darkened his skin to experience life as a black man in the American South.
Wow.
And he wrote about how this experience made him acutely aware of the pervasive discrimination he hadn't noticed before.
Oh, wow.
Simply changing his race made visible the deeply ingrained prejudices that society had become accustomed to.
That's a powerful example of how our own limited perspective, shaped by what we're used to, can blind us to the experiences of others.
It really is. And this same process of becoming desensitized, of becoming okay with what we see every day, can even allow for the erosion of freedoms, creating a space for tyranny to take hold.
That's a chilling thought that something as subtle as getting used to things could be connected to something as extreme as that.
It is, and the book talks about how this played out in Nazi Germany.
Okay.
There are accounts from everyday citizens who described how they adapted to increasingly oppressive laws and behaviors, often without fully realizing the extent of what was happening until it was too late.
Wow.
It's like that metaphor of the frog in boiling water.
If the temperature rises gradually enough.
They don't jump out.
Right.
And that's why understanding habituation is so important.
Mhm.
It's a reminder that we can't just go on autopilot accepting things because they're familiar or because that's just the way it is. We have to constantly question what we see, what we experience, what we're told, and be willing to challenge the status quo.
That's a powerful message, and it connects to something you were saying earlier about subtle injustices. It's not just about these huge historical events, right?
Right. Think about microaggressions, for example.
Okay.
Those subtle but offensive comments or actions directed at marginalized groups.
Mm.
Individually, they might seem small, but they add up, contributing to a culture where those inequalities are normalized and perpetuated.
And because they're so common, so woven into the fabric of everyday life, we often don't even register them as harmful. We've become habituated to them.
Precisely. And this highlights the importance of consciously challenging our own assumptions, our own unconscious biases.
Mm-hmm.
We have to actively seek out different perspectives, different voices, and be willing to listen and learn from those who have different lived experiences.
So it's about developing a dishabituation mindset, constantly questioning what we've become accustomed to, and actively seeking ways to break free from those limiting patterns of thought and behavior.
That's a great way to put it. And the book actually offers some concrete advice on how to do that. One suggestion is to be intentional about incorporating variety and breaks into your routines. Remember the macaroni and cheese study?
Yeah, you'd think eating mac and cheese every day would be amazing, but...
But it highlights that even pleasurable things can become less enjoyable with overexposure.
Right.
The same goes for our routines. The book suggests that by shaking things up, even in small ways, we can prevent our brains from going on autopilot and missing out on the richness of our experiences.
So small changes can lead to big shifts in perception.
Exactly. It's about disrupting those automatic patterns and forcing your brain to pay attention again. Another powerful tool for dishabituation is seeking out new experiences and perspectives. Travel is a great example, but it can also be as simple as picking up a book on a topic you know nothing about, or having a conversation with someone who has a completely different background or viewpoint than your own.
It's all about expanding our horizons.
Exactly. And it's not just about seeking novelty for the sake of it. It's about challenging your assumptions, seeing the world through different lenses, and gaining a deeper understanding of yourself and the complexities of the world around you.
That makes a lot of sense, but I do want to acknowledge that habituation isn't always a bad thing, right? If our brains were constantly reacting to every little thing, we'd be completely overwhelmed.
You're absolutely right. Habituation is essential for our survival. It allows us to filter out the noise and focus on what's important. Imagine if you were constantly bombarded by every sensation, every sound, every smell, you'd be paralyzed.
Right, so it's about finding a balance between recognizing the potential downsides of habituation and appreciating its benefits.
Precisely. And interestingly, the book talks about how technology, despite its potential to create echo chambers and reinforce our biases, can actually be used as a tool for breaking free from those limitations. It calls them dishabituation machines.
Dishabituation machines. I've got to hear more about this.
Well, think about virtual reality, for example. It can transport you to different places, cultures, and historical periods, allowing you to experience the world from perspectives you might never have imagined.
So instead of just reading about something, you're immersed in it, experiencing it firsthand, virtually at least.
Exactly. And while social media can definitely be a source of misinformation and polarization, it also has the power to connect us with people from all over the world, exposing us to a diversity of viewpoints and experiences that can challenge our assumptions and broaden our understanding of the world.
So it's really about using technology in a conscious and intentional way to broaden our horizons, rather than letting it narrow them.
Absolutely. It's a powerful tool for dishabituation when used wisely.
It's like hitting the refresh button on the relationship, constantly rediscovering each other.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that our partners are always growing and changing, just like we are. There's always something new to learn and appreciate about them, even after years of being together. That's what keeps a relationship vibrant.
That's such a beautiful way to think about it. It's about embracing the mystery of love, the fact that we can never truly know everything about another person, and finding excitement in that journey of discovery.
I love that. And it speaks to a larger point about habituation. It can work both ways. It can make us blind to the beauty in our lives, the amazing things and people we've come to take for granted, but it can also dull the sharp edges of pain and difficulty.
That's so true. We adapt to challenging circumstances too. And while that can be a survival mechanism, it also means we might miss opportunities for growth or change.
Exactly. The key takeaway here, I think, is the importance of awareness. By understanding how habituation works, how it can be both beneficial and limiting, we can start to make more conscious choices about what we allow to fade into the background and what we choose to bring into focus.
So it's about becoming the conductors of our own habituation symphony, choosing what to tune out and what to amplify.
I love that analogy. We have more agency than we realize. This deep dive has really highlighted how much we just operate on autopilot, how much our brains are silently shaping our experiences without us even knowing it.
It's a little humbling when you think about it, but also empowering.
Absolutely, because once we're aware of these patterns, we can start to interrupt them. We can choose to pay attention, to be more present, to see the world and the people around us with fresh eyes.
And that awareness, that conscious effort to break free from those habitual patterns, that's what can lead to a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about embracing curiosity, seeking out new experiences, and challenging our assumptions.
And remembering that everyone else is experiencing the world through the lens of their own unique set of habituations, which can help us to be more understanding and compassionate.
That's such an important point. Habituation doesn't just affect us individually, it impacts how we interact with and understand each other.
So it's about recognizing that we're all shaped by our past experiences, but we're not trapped by them. We have the power to learn, to grow, and to change.
Exactly. And that's a powerful and hopeful message.
This deep dive has been such a journey. From the science of how our brains adapt to the profound ways that adaptation plays out in our relationships, our work, and our understanding of the world.
It really has. And it highlights that even something as seemingly simple as getting used to things can hold the key to unlocking a richer, more meaningful existence.
I completely agree. So to wrap up, here's what I'm taking away from this deep dive. We're not just passive recipients of information and experiences, we're active participants in shaping our own perceptions. By understanding how habituation works, we can become more intentional about what we choose to focus on, how we interact with the world, and ultimately, how we live our lives.
Perfectly put. And if I could add one final thought, it would be this. The world is full of wonder and beauty, but it's also full of suffering and injustice. Habituation can make us blind to both. By staying curious, by questioning our assumptions, by actively seeking out diverse perspectives, we can awaken to the richness and complexity of life and commit to creating a world that's more aligned with our values and aspirations.
That's such an inspiring note to end on. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us. We hope it's given you some food for thought and perhaps a new perspective on the power of noticing and questioning the things we've become accustomed to. Until next time.